Welcome, Internet, to the Psychoanalytic Talk. And today I wanted to talk about a very interesting concept which I found in Aggression in Personality Disorders and Perversion by Otto Kernberg. So this concept is the concept of the hologram man as defined by Paulina Kernberg. And I want to do something that I generally don't do, as I find it kind of a little stale, but I wanted to read the concept because it's very short. And I found that Otto Kernberg, when he restituted the concept of his wife to the reader, is very clear, very precise, and I don't think I could ever do better than him, even if I paraphrased for half an hour. So I'm going to read it to you. So, just for your knowledge, it's page 75 to 76 in my book, which is this edition, right? It's the Yale, I think, edition. So, basically, Paulina Kernberg, in her personal communications, has coined the term hologram man to refer to a patient who creates a vague, ethereal image of themselves in the diagnostic sessions that seems strangely disconnected from the current reality or the actual past, an image that changes moment to moment in the light of different angles of inquiry and leaves the diagnostician with a disturbing sense of unreality. So it's a very short concept, yet it packs so much. So the reason, and there's many reasons, there's about 5 reasons, and I'm going to try and go through with this, that I wanted to talk about it, is that precise image is very interesting, and I find it very meaningful, the hologram. The hologram being something that is both there and not there, and that my imagination just runs wild with those types of concepts. And the second reason is basically I found it very interesting. It's both a patient that's showing something and yet is showing nothing at the same time. Someone that's both showing and hiding in a way that is very interesting, and also shows that for the patient there is a discontinuity in themselves, that they're both being manipulative, meaning that they're not showing what should be shown, and they're trying to hide something, but they're not doing it necessarily in a continuous frame, because their self, their sense of identity, when I mean self, I mean the sense of identity is not there. They haven't been building a true connection of their personalities, meaning that it's fragmented, and they show it through that emotion, which is shared emotion with the clinician, and especially because it's so powerful that you can feel unreal, like if the event strangely didn't make any sense. And that's also the very interesting idea, is that it's as if the meaning itself was eroded by that presentation that's both flexible and yet meaningless, which is in itself very interesting. And it also shows that the clinician can be lost, that the shared feeling, the projective identification, or I think that's how you say it in English. I'm sorry, because in French it's identification projective. So there's always an inverse, and I'm not very good at inverting at the right time. So basically, it's a shared emotion, and an emotion that the patient projects into the therapist. And I think that that's what Paulina Kernberg is trying to define. And I found that definition is incredibly interesting and incredibly important, as it's both a way of manipulating by super adapting, and yet a way also of showing the cracks and trying to cover up the cracks at the same time, as if everything was always constantly unconstant in a way. Like the only consistency is the inconsistency, really, of those people. And yet I find it interesting because in my experience I've also encountered it for other profiles than the ones elaborated on in this chapter. So in this chapter, where Paulina Kernberg's definition of the hologram man is described, is chapter 5, which is antisocial personality disorders and narcissistic personality disorders. And it's in those frames that it is shown to the clinician that basically those people do have a hologram man aspect to them. But in my experience, that can also be found in other types of disorders or issues. So here I'm not going to make a list, as I frankly don't feel that it's very important, and B, I don't want to necessarily go into technicalities. But I also think that people who have a false sense of self or who are disconnected from others can present something of holographic, meaning, as she defined it, a vague, ethereal. And I do think that people, for example, who are completely withdrawn or who are afraid of the therapist might also give that impression that they're trying to distance themselves, to try and create a space that's, how can I say, like a no man's land in which neither the therapist nor them can enter. And if there is a tentative to enter, basically it turns into a sense of unreality, because they're projecting something that they're not in order to try and distance themselves from what the therapist can bring to the table or what they can bring to the table. And of course this is me extrapolating, it's me building on the concept of the hologram man, as this is not exactly what she's defining. And I understand that, and I find her definition to be very good, but yet again, I think that when someone is having a discontinued sense of self, it might also be that the connection cannot be established because the relationship is in of itself a discrepancy within the selfhood of the individual, meaning that the presence of someone else is in of itself provoking those emotions, or someone that wants to know or ascribe a meaning might be too disheartening, disconcerting for someone that has an unstable sense of self. And as such, I feel that they might present and yet try to adapt, try to please, and yet also give a sense of unreality, because you're like, this is not a continuous basis, this is discontinuous or disingenuine. And I also think that in certain cases, people who have barred themselves from relationships, or who are suspicious of the clinician, might also project a hologram of themselves in order to not be touched or hurt, or what they think is to be hurt by the clinician, in also a way of trying to avoid perhaps confronting who they are or what they've done. And here I really, as you can see, have kind of distanced myself from the very basis of this chapter 5, but I do think that there is value in also putting a certain form of distance, as therapeutically these are very powerful emotions when you feel that there's something unreal, and it's so interesting and important, I think, to reintegrate those within the framework of therapy, because as Paulina Kernberg puts it, it's for diagnostic purposes. But I think that these things can happen when you're entering therapy or practicing therapy with someone, and that those things can be really like a guiding light towards understanding, because what unreality does is that it kind of breaks down the meaning that you can have both in the feeling of the therapy and of the patient, of course, and even the meaning of your work. And that feeling is the basis, like it shows you that there's something there, even though it's vague and ethereal. It seems as though basically the hologram in of itself is still a presence. The understanding of why there is a hologram is a guideline, is of importance, I think. And that's how I conceive of it, at least, how at the core level that someone is hiding or projecting something else in order to avoid. And the reason is why avoid? Is it for manipulative reasons, that the people are disingenuous because they want to hide who they are fundamentally? Or is it because they're hiding because they're afraid, deeply afraid of judgment or of negative gaze? Or even are they hiding because they can't show themselves because they've never found who they truly were, and the only alternative to who they are is that hologram? That hologram would be like a bit of a false self or persona to try and hide who they are and try and protect whatever is remaining of themselves. And in that aspect, I think that the hologram is an important concept, and that it should be, I think, used perhaps in a bigger way, because it's true that those feelings are very important, and I think they can be a real basis for thought and for developing one's own abilities to understand one's emotions, and by consequence the emotions of the patients. As here it's a relationship between transference and countertransference, and that relationship is at the crux of therapy, and the hologram man is a starting point of that transfer-countertransference relationships. And I found that very interesting and very important. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As a little reminder, Paulina Kernberg only used it for antisocial personality disorders on narcissistic personality disorders, or sins of that, on that, let's say, on that spectrum. But here I'm broadening it up, and that broadening is my interpretation of the idea, or my expansion on the idea. So I just want you to be understanding of this. So I hope you liked the video, and if you want to start a discussion, a conversation, if you have questions, please feel free to drop in the comments, and I'll answer them as soon as I can. I'll see you in the next one.